Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. Welcome back to League Unlock. My name is Eric, flying Han Solo on today's epi as we are finally at the finish line for the spring split, CB LOL, and LPL finals over the weekend. Finally wrapping up. We'll get to the MSI play-in group draw reaction with this so lovely double elim format. But first, gotta touch on the BLG versus TES action at the very least, because we did have a pretty competitive series. Even though it didn't go the distance, 3 out of the 4 games were incredibly back and forth. I think it was game 2 was the stomp in the way of BLG, but across the board, story lines to follow from this series. Elk ends up picking up series MVP, absolutely deservedly so. Lucian, Senna, Varus, Clinic, basically across the series. He definitely outperformed Jackie Love in this set. Jackie Love, who had been playing at such an incredibly high level. We got this incredibly spicy third game draft with the Quadra 80 carries in the bot lane, the Varus Callista versus Draven Ashe. That's the game that TES ended up actually winning, but it's BLG finally breaking, I'm not going to call it a curse, but the best way to get over the JDG hump is just don't match up against JDG. Have TES do the dirty work for you, and BLG, everybody but Knight and Bin picking up their first LPL title. It's, of course, the first LPL title in the history of Bilibili as an organization, and the storylines for so many of these guys on this squad have been absolutely groomed in difficult times in the LPL. Elk has been on some bad teams going back to when he was Jumang before he changed his name. Bottom feeders in the LPL. Jun on the shattered, fractured IG post World Championship with Rookie and the Shy, and he was so often the scapegoat on that squad coming in, and Elk picked up series MVP. But the biggest gap individually was absolutely Jun versus Tien. So the full climb to the top upper echelon of the LPL. And listen, we've been talking about Jun right there with Kanavi as probably the best jungler in the LPL. Going on a year and a half, 2 years now in the LPL. So the growth that we've seen out of him, absolutely incredible. Just a top to bottom solid performance out of BLG, proving that they are the best team fighting squad in the LPL, and they will and should be probably overall favorites heading into MSI, mainly just because the LPL always gets a little bit of a buff when it comes to MSI, as time and time again we're talking about an LPL squad coming away with the title at the midseason invitational. And I mean, BLG coming in looking damn good, even though Gen G won their series against T1, and we were talking about them as the best team in the LCK and the world for many weeks, many months even. But BLG, the fashion that they went through this playoff run, the dominance that they showed, the little bit of shakiness that we did see out of Gen G, especially in that bot lane. When you talk about polar opposite ends, feeling about those 80 carries and bot lanes as a whole for BLG and Gen G, because Elk and On look like a couple of dudes on a mission, and that mission is to embarrass the LCK at yet another international event, at least yet another MSI. We're not going to lump Worlds into that, although we're not far removed from there almost being 4 LPL teams in the semifinals at the World Championships. So LPL shows up when it matters most at these international events, and now they are going to be the host nation, of course, for this year's installment of MSI. So should be feeling oh so very good about BLG heading into this year's MSI. And even though they lost top eSports, I think still going to be an absolute menace, a huge threat. Jackie Love had some questionable flashes. We didn't quite see the pop-off from 369 that we saw in pretty much every other series in this playoff run for TES, and obviously some of that credit is going to go to Bin and BLG in shutting him down, but I still don't really have too many concerns about TES matching up internationally and absolutely steamrolling their way through this play-in stage. Double elim for them. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't drop a game. So, kind of both squads. You throw T1 and TES, and again, we'll get into these actual play-in draws, but not worried about either of the second seeds from the LCK and LPL. But big congrats over to BLG, and obviously now, we've already talked about to no end Chovy coming in with a 4-peat of LCK titles, but now we got Knight quietly rocking the 3-peat after back-to-back JDG wins. Now he heads over to BLG and grabs his first a title in his first ever split with the squad. So Knight versus Chovy matchup should be double star, double plus plus in terms of the most exciting matchup, at least for me, at this entire upcoming mid-season invitational. Now let's get to the good stuff, because we had the play-in draw. GA comes in, and first and foremost, when you're talking about the format for this year's MSI, it's basically the same as what we were getting last year. Best of threes during this play-in stage, double elim, gotta win 2 series to qualify to match up against the big boys on the Rift. And you can lose, and it doesn't, you can lose 1 set, blah, 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 same stuff. Really, the big change is what some of the implications are, what's on the line at MSI, because the team that wins the whole event automatically going to Worlds. Don't need to even worry about the summer split. Take it off. Don't even bother playing. You're already going to the World Championship, and obviously that auto qualification will give that major region a 4th seed heading into Worlds, because the squad's automatically qualified, and the runner-up region also gonna get a 4th seed. So yes, if there is a miracle LCS LEC run to finals, they will net a 4th seed for their region, which I'm not sure anybody wants to see. Most people expecting both the LCK and the LPL to be rocking 4 seeds heading towards the World Championship. But I think the big thing to note here is the LCK is not coming in with 4 seeds automatically, and then whoever, if Gen.G or T1 win, they're going to have 5 seeds heading to Worlds. They've kind of reset it so that everyone's going to have 3 seeds going, and there's the potential here. MSI actually has some stakes to it, on top of obviously just winning the title, the accolade, the cash prize, but you're playing for your region and playing for a chance to kind of be sweat scot-free when the summer split rolls around if you are already qualified. But let's get into the actual draw. Group A, T1 versus Astral eSports out of LATAM, the LLA. Obviously, of all the 4 initial matchups, this is far and away the biggest mismatch. That was probably going to be the case. Whoever T1 was matching up against, don't really see an angle where Astral taking a win unless T1 has a little bit of fun in one of these matches. Mr. Jose Diodo coming in. This is one of the first, I think, full Latin American rosters that they've sent internationally in a couple of years. So fan base wise, obviously very excited for them. And listen, I know it's meme to have T1, the defending world champions, having to go through the play-in stage. But for these minor region squads to actually get to match up against T1, and not just to one of best of one where they can kind of try and cheese their way through, but to actually play a best of series against the defending world champions. We've talked about this at length over the years. It's going to bump up these minor regions to actually get meaningful matches against some of the best teams in the world. So very excited for Astral to get that matchup, and even if they go to losers, they're going to get another best of opportunity. But obviously T1, absolutely massive favorites. Then it gets a bit more interesting with FlyQuest versus PSG. It just doesn't feel like an international tournament without PSG talent on the Rift. And obviously Maple has got a little bit of LCS connection after his time on TSM. And him and Jensen, you can go back to 2016 with Flash Wolves versus Cloud9 matching up at Worlds. That's how long ago, 8 years, these two guys were matching up on the Rift. So this is an interesting one. PSG obviously had a pretty clean final run through playoffs. They 3-0'd their final 2 best of 5s and were clearly the best team coming out of the PCS region. But even when they've looked dominant the last couple years, we've seen them internationally not really match up even against the 3rd or 4th seeds from the LCS or the LEC. So maybe a tough battle, but FlyQuest should be able to win this series. Obviously, even Masu making his international debut, same with Busio, matching up against an experienced marksman like Betty. Good to get things rolling. Good to get things ramped up. A guy who has so much international experience against these basically rookies. Masu's a rookie. I'm calling Busio basically a rookie. But this is important, I think, for FlyQuest to win this series right away because it then gets them an opportunity to play T1 early. And no, I'm not expecting FlyQuest to take a game or by any means win against T1, but to be able to play T1 early on in the tournament, I feel like is going to be absolutely vital for the learning curve. Just look last year when the Golden Guardians were matching up against BLG. They took a game. It felt like the Guardians kind of leveled up and were playing at a high level for the rest of MSI, even though they kind of didn't in the best ofs and eventually lost to Cloud9. But FlyQuest getting that opportunity early, and most importantly, every time we have these international events with the LCS, I feel like their first matches are the most important to get confidence, to feel like they can actually beat people. It should get done against PSG, even if they lose that and go down to losers. I mean, it's a disaster if they lose to Astral. FlyQuest has basically 2 opportunities to beat PSG, is how you're assuming this plays out, because even if they lose that first round, T1 likely to beat PSG in winners. So basically, all FlyQuest has to do is beat PSG Talon at least once and maybe twice, depending on how things play out. But I know this is the toughest draw, but FlyQuest should be able to get through. If you want to actually prove yourself at the international event, you have to be winning these. What power level of FlyQuest are we going to get? They're looking for redemption after those finals. But, I mean, truthfully, I know the FlyQuest stock was absolutely tanked after they lost to Team Liquid, but full credit to Team Liquid. They played that finals very well. It felt like FlyQuest wasn't ready for what they were throwing down, and up until those finals, we were feeling damn good about FlyQuest. We were ready to slot them into the top 10 global power rankings. So if they're playing like they did the rest of the playoffs or to close out the regular season, then truthfully, they shouldn't have any trouble matching up against PSG, especially when their strongest point, Junjia, who, what did they say? He's won the last 3 finals MVPs for PSG. Well, you've got Inspired. You've got a former MVP yourself matching up there. So the jungle matchup should be absolutely no concern. It really is just for FlyQuest. How do the youngins, how do Busio and Masu do in their debut in the international stage? Because it feels like it's been the last couple events we've had some rookies in NA get an opportunity to showcase themselves very early on in their careers on that international set. So I'm excited to see FlyQuest bot lane, see if they're able to step up, but it'd be a pretty big surprise if it wasn't T1 and FlyQuest making their way out of Group A in play-ins. Group B action, you can talk. Is this the more exciting one? I mean, I love this new format for MSI because there's really no boring. Every game is meaningful. That's one of the main changes that they wanted to talk about when you're immediately getting dropped into best ofs. There's zero zilch best of ones in this format, which, I mean, 2 thumbs up, especially when you have so few teams actually at this event. But you kick things off with Top Esports versus Loud. And again, quick reminder, this last CBLOL final between Loud and Pain, over 450,000 peak viewers watching that finals, which completely dwarfs what we got in the LCS, comparable to the LEC, set another record. So obviously, we know the fan base is absolutely immense in the CBLOL, which I can't wait to see how it matches up against TES, who are obviously going to be the host nation, the hometown kids, to kick things off in play-ins in China. So what is the crowd going to be like? How well will these Brazilian fans travel up to China, all the way to China? Are they Gonna be noisy because we know they're not a lot noisier than probably LPL fans even are. But Top Esports obviously gonna be massive favorites in that one. Loud is a very familiar roster with, Robo picking up his record 7th CBLOL title. Tinones we've seen, Route, Croc. I think Redbird is the only new player coming over to Loud, but he's been a staple in the CBLOL scene for a very long time. I feel like Loud, they always get one of the tournament favorites in their first matchup, but likely not coming away with the win against TES. If you do drop them down to losers, how do we feel about them matching up? Because the other angle that you're talking about is Fnatic versus GAM eSports, and this is a rivalry that's gone a ways back, and you can talk about TES and GAM. These are all very familiar matchups that we've had with familiar faces. Unfortunately for GAM, it's really only Levi and Kiaya that are those familiar faces we know. We've followed all the debacle controversy that's gone on over in the VCS Vietnamese scene with all this match fixing, all these subs coming in. I think GAM is coming in with 2 to 3 subs. It might even be 3. But maybe if they had their full starting 5, you could see an angle where there's some chaos kind of upset against Fnatic, but I'm hard-pressed to see it. I'm hard-pressed to see Fnatic dropping this one, even though couldn't get it done against G2. They had some messy games, some messy series throughout their entire playoff run in the LEC, but still feel pretty good about Fnatic. Taking down GAM, taking down Loud or GAM again, whoever the losers one is. Upset against TES? Probably not. But, I mean, this is a historical matchup as well, except, that 2020 playoff series. I don't think there's anyone. 369 still on the roster from then, but there's really nobody from Fnatic that was on that squad. So it's more an organizational rivalry than anything else when you're talking about this one. But still, I'm very excited for all of these matchups and just for MSI to get rolling. It's a quick turnaround. Again, less than 2 weeks after that LPL finals gets wrapped up. We're already going to be rolling things in to MSI. So yes, the major regions, the Pool 1 seeds, T1, FlyQuest, TES, and Fnatic are going to be the big favorites. They were the big favorites in 2023. MSI is even more interesting as a starter point for me than Worlds, because it's the first one of the year and you can kind of see, okay, what level are these minor regions actually at? Like, is this a 8K gold lead by 15 minutes? The game is completely over. Is there a little bit of actual competitiveness? Can they showcase something that maybe the major regions aren't putting together? There's still the potential for upsets, and I know it's even harder in these best of threes to see the minor regions angle when a cheese strat or an off game from one of these top teams isn't even enough. It's not the best of one. Big upset influence things. They have that bounce back opportunity in a best of 3, but there's always potential. You never know what can happen on the international stage. There's a reason we and countless other channels have made so many big upset at international events, crazy moments. You wouldn't believe what happened at MSI 2024. Maybe we'll be blessed with one of these moments in the matchup. But I mean, head-to-head storylines and players returning. Obviously, number one, having both BLG and TES be full. And there's a lot of rosters that are full Chinese when you're talking BLG, TES. PSG is full. Taiwanese coming into this matchup. Loud is not full because Croc and Route have been there for a long time. But Astral, as I mentioned, full LATAM. Fnatic, not full. EU, FlyQuest, equally as EU as Fnatic, basically, in that matchup. But seeing a lot of these minor region squads be fully represented by their countries that they're coming from is going to be obviously exciting. I'm expecting some serious trash talk, and I want to see. I'm looking at the bounce back for T1 and Top Esports. Both of them dropping a little bit of stock after losing finals, and I think the complete opposite. You see, Astral from the LLA go from their finals to level up to match up against T1, and the opposite end of that, T1 going from a 5-game banger against Gen G to then matching up against an LLA team. I think there's going to be some cathartic anger coming out of both T1 and TES, and unfortunately, it's going to be the CB LOL and LLA who are receiving the punch downs from these LPL and LCK squads. But again, even though this play-in stage, and we talk about this at Worlds and at MSI, the play-in stage, we're like, what? What's the point? You know these 4 favorite teams are going to be advancing through, but even as it often does end up being the case, as the favorites trouncing their way through, there's still so much we can learn. We've got a new patch coming in for MSI, 14.8. We've seen a lot of people talk about how that's going to impact things. So the development of the meta from the early on stages of this event, because time and time again, we talk about international events, and it's a microcosm of what the meta is, especially when you're comparing to, I mean, some of these summer finals are going to have been a month ago, basically, by the time MSI rolls around. So you're talking about a couple patches ago. The game often looks very different than what you were seeing throughout a lot of these playoff runs. So seeing the meta get established early, maybe it even is some of these minor region teams pulling out picks that you're not expecting, trying to come away with an upset, and the major region squads say, damn, I didn't know Karthus jungle was going to be so insane, or Morgana jungle. It feels like it's always an AP jungler that takes over MSI. Morgana, Rumble, Karthus, maybe not so. That was a bad example. But you never know what kind of crazy pocket pick might end up influencing the meta throughout the entire event. So even though there's big favorites, I cannot wait for this play-in stage. I cannot wait to be upset against FlyQuest and LCS teams for absolutely dropping the ball when it comes to being favorites and losing games, because that is a pair as synonymous as space-time itself. The LCS losing games that they shouldn't lose on the international event. But less than 2 weeks away from this year's MSI event taking place. That is it today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you all, you beautiful people, for hanging out as always, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.